Well, the book on democracies and death cults is a mixture of first-hand reporting and observation, interviews, and a wider reflection, not just on the war that's been going on since the 7th of October, but the war's been going on a lot longer. And also, I suppose, on what for me is one of the overwhelming questions, which I'm sure we'll get to, which is the reaction in the rest of the world. Obviously, on the 7th itself, it was a brigade-sized attack on Israel from Gaza. Hamas broke through the security fence and attacked all the softest targets they could. They swiftly overwhelmed things like the observation base in Nahal Oz. They ran through the communities in the south, very peaceful, peacenik, effectively communities of the kibbutzim, as they're called, the communities, and murdered and raped and burned and kidnapped. And of course, they, from their point of view, had the great good fortune of also coming across hundreds of young people dancing in the early hours of the morning at a dance party and rampaged through that with RPGs and Kalashnikovs and grenades and hammers and more, and got within, 20 kilometers into Israel, places like Ofakim and Sderot, important towns, and carried out their massacres there as well. We now know that the plan was that Hezbollah did the same thing from the north. Hezbollah joined in the war within 24 hours by starting firing rockets again in very large numbers into northern Israel from southern Lebanon. But the plan was that they would do the same thing from the north and carry out similar massacres there and effectively be able to meet in the middle and garrote Israel from the center. The interesting reason why, I think it'll be found out in the future, but why they didn't coordinate better was Hamas didn't trust any line of communication to Hezbollah to let them know exactly when they were going to do it that wouldn't be intercepted. The Iranian revolutionary government in Tehran, which obviously funds Hamas and Hezbollah and trains and arms, knew of the plan. It was a very successful attempt to annihilate the state, but they didn't get close to that, but they got worryingly closer than people might have thought they were capable of. I think from the Israeli side, it was obviously one of the most, if not the most catastrophic intelligence and military failure since the foundation of the state. And I think there are several reasons why. One is a perception problem. What a lot of military commanders and others described to me as the conception that had prevailed in Israel for some years in the security and military establishment was that Hamas were content with being corrupt and governing Gaza and, lining their pockets and living in Qatar and becoming billionaires, but that, like many other terrorist groups and cults, that they would end up becoming just corrupt and not losing their ideology, but the ideology becomes secondary. That's the first thing, was there was just a massive error of the conception in Israel. And then there are the multiple, manifold security and military failures of the day and leading up to the day. And there already have been quite a lot of people held to account for that, and there doubtless will be in the future as well. The single thing I heard, which I heard most and which was most distressing in a way, was the number of people who described to me, who survived the massacres in the South, who said that, they'd said to their children, "Don't worry, the army will be here in minutes," and they weren't. In many places it was many hours till the army got there. And there are reasons for that. There are some reasons that will be military failings, leadership failings. Other things were I discovered were very human failings. I don't want to overstress the failure of the army, because actually certain units and things got down very fast. There was a unit of Devan who got down to the junction, by within about an hour, 90 minutes of the massacres starting, and joined in the fight. And then there were self-starters, who I write about in the book, extraordinary people who just broke orders and just realized the magnitude of what was happening and said, "We're needed in the South, go," and fought very hard for hours, days, in some cases. But the complexities on the ground were unbelievable. I mean, as usually happens in warfare, but what they call the fog of war is a very real thing. You know what you can see it in hindsight, but you can't see when you're in it. And one of the things that made it very complicated was, for instance, Hamas coming in, taking uniforms off dead Israelis, wearing them, coming in with Israeli-style apparatus on them. There's a Muslim doctor I quote in the book I interviewed who describes how he was going to he's an Israeli Muslim Arab, and he's a doctor, he was going to his shift at the hospital at 6:30 in the morning. The rockets start coming in, because the rockets started first and then the full invasion. And he described to me how he's one of the members of this group, the United Hatzalah, which is a first responders group, and they sort of they get an alert and it tells them that a car has crashed nearby, and they put on their first aid kit and so on and go. And he got one of those alerts at one of the junctions and realized there was a car, that something had happened and there were some dead bodies, and he stops and he sees these men dressed as soldiers, and they start, and he's wearing his Hatzalah gear, and they start firing at him, and he just thinks, what the hell is going on? And they turned out to be Hamas dressed as Israeli soldiers. They used him as a human shield to try to protect from any air assault, and in the end they shot him and left him, and he survived. He's a very, very brave man. So there was a lot of confusion like that. There's a girl whose father I interviewed. She was at the Nova party, and I met him at one of the reunions of the party in the weeks after, and the reunions of the survivors and the family and so on. And he described how in the last moments of his daughter's life, she phoned him on her phone, like a lot of people, and he reassured her that the army would get there and so on. And her boyfriend was shot in the head and was lying on her lap, and she was obviously panicked. And they'd managed to get into a car and escape the party, but they went to a community where they thought they'd be safe in the south of Israel, and they were told to stay where they were by somebody who she said was a policeman, and he wasn't a policeman. He was Hamas dressed as police, and she died. She was shot and killed as well. And so there was a lot of confusion like that. It hopefully we're the world will find out exactly what went wrong. Israel will find out exactly what went wrong that led to this catastrophe. But I mean, it was a complete catastrophe.
Do you have a sense of how such an intelligence failure could have happened? So there's a bit of a temptation to go into conspiracy land, because it's such a giant intelligence failure. It seems that there was some manipulation on the inside for political reasons, or for...
You don't need to go into conspiracy land. I mean, I think there are people who say that there were parts of the intelligence network and so on that were withholding the information. I don't know. Again, people will find out. There's an awful lot of politics inside Israel, and it's hard to know that at this stage. I think that most people are sort of still Israeli and not Israeli, including people who are anti-Israel, who just believe that Israeli military and particularly intelligence dominance is so strong that there must have been some kind of conspiracy. Otherwise, how could this have happened? I don't think you need to go into that. I think that, I mean, for instance, some of the young women at the observation base are on the record. They've said, I've spoken to them myself, and who said that they had been warning in the weeks running up to the 7th that they were seeing maneuvers and training by the border, which suggested that Hamas was going to do something like this, and they say that they were ignored. Though you speak to some of the more senior commanders about that, and they say the thing is that this stuff was happening all the time. So it's very hard to know at the moment.